Hello again. We had a great conversation with the chair of the trustees of Woodland Heritage. Woodland Heritage is a unique charity and it brings together all tree people, and it's a real vehicle for wood users to put something back and contribute to the proper management of British trees. They have excellent woodland to workshop, really giving people the opportunity to understand where wood comes from and to work with it. So welcome to this week's edition of Tree Lady Talks. And they have a fantastic sawmill, a demonstration wood, and they help with research with partner organisations. This is a broad-ranging conversation and I hope you enjoy it. So welcome to Simon Burvill, Chair of the Trustees of Woodland Heritage, but also of Gaze Burvill. Simon, tell us a bit about yourself, please.
Okay, where do I start? I loved woodworking at school. I think it's a hugely important thing and we don't do enough of it anymore. But I was taught when I was 7 or 8 by Able Seaman Humby, who was a former naval craftsman who taught me how to use a chisel and tenon saw, and I used to love my carpentry lessons. And then I kind of left it for a very long period and became an engineer. My father was an engineer in the Navy and pursued that through university and initial career working for French companies. I actually lived in France for a while. And at university, I'd met my girlfriend, who's now my wife. She's a fluent linguist, so I was very lucky. Ended up in Paris, where I lived for 5 years, but getting more and more into business, really, and commerce. But carried on tinkering with wood. I made a mezzanine floor for our apartment in Paris, and nearly set up a business, but got scared off by French bureaucracy. But had a bit of a midlife crisis at 30. Thought, there's more to life, and was looking around.
Sorry.
Right, yeah.
Simon, I'm going to interrupt you
Yes.
there. Midlife at 30,
Yeah.
you're a mere baby. Come on.
Yes, you're right. Well, certainly now.
You had a change of direction.
I suddenly realized that perhaps there were some more important things in life. Maybe that's the better way to phrase it. And it was actually on a holiday skiing in the Alps that somebody mentioned John Makepeace, and I looked up his history and about him. I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And I actually just called him up and he was very gracious. And I went over and saw Parnham, which was in full flow at that time, sending out designer makers. And I sort of liked that, but I sort of thought, do I really have the patience to make, 3 or 4 pieces of furniture a year? And if I'm honest, I don't.
Well, John Makepeace, OBE, it's really worth it. People who don't know him, I've had the pleasure of speaking to him and meeting him. Go on to his website and see the astonishing furniture. It's so beautiful artistically and also in terms of woodwork. So, yeah, he's been such an important person in industry. So, yes, so you spoke to John.
Well, John is a visionary, and I spoke to him and he said, well, before you sort of go away, look, let me show you this other place. And he took me up to Hook Park, and it was just like a magical place. I'll start getting emotional now, but it's this 350-acre woodland just outside Bedminster in Dorset, and in the middle of it, he'd built the most extraordinary buildings out of wood thinnings, which was a nascent college of trying to address the problem which Woodland Heritage is actually still doing its best to address, and that is, how do we establish more productive forestry in the UK? And his vision was that there weren't enough trees, there weren't enough forests, and part of the problem is if you're establishing a forest from nothing, you've got to wait sometimes an awful long time before you get any income, and the wood needs to be thinned, managed to be productive, and there's all these trees that are cut down in between the trees that go on to mature and make fine wood, like I like to use in furniture making. And if we could up the value of those, by turning them into something instead of just firewood, we could give an income to the forest owner and solve this conundrum of where does the money come from, if you can't wait long enough. And it was a very inspiring project. And in fact, now it's been taken over by the Architects Association, and they're doing amazing things down there. In fact, Woodland Heritage did a field day down there a couple of years ago. Absolutely stunning work going on there. So it captivated my imagination. I did a year's intense course there, which was fabulous. I learned to wield a chainsaw and fell trees, but also learned about furniture design and making, and using quite sophisticated machinery, CNC machines and everything. And we could cut our teeth on contracts to supply people like Habitat. And I learned so much in just 12 months. But this whole connection between trees, timber, and final product. And I think that connection, that really opened my mind up. I mean, I've always loved wood and working in wood, but I'd never really made such a strong connection with the trees that it came from. And I think this is our problem. I mean, this is society's problem, is that we've lost this connection between, the wood and the trees. And
absolutely.
And it goes to our core. I know you did an interview with Roland Ennis. I got his book just here, The Wood Age.
Great book,
and a fabulous book. And I think that book for me just completely encapsulates the importance that trees are to us as a species, and our connection is innate. We are bound to wood, but somehow we've managed to forget it all the same.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating. That's Professor Roland Ennis's book, The Wood Age, which we interviewed him about a year ago. But it really is, we wouldn't have evolved potentially without wood, without fire to make nutritious food for our brains to develop. And it just goes on and explains every single facet of our evolution relative to wood. And we talk about the Iron Age and we give that credence, but frankly, it's all about wood. I also, and just going back to what you were saying, you've got an engineering background, that would have been very useful as well. Even if you don't think it's useful, it certainly would have been. Yeah.
Oh my God, yes, I've used it a lot. I mean, my speciality was actually electrical engineering, which is a little bit away from wood, but actually, we use a lot of electrical machinery. So for a long time, I was the one making the connections and figuring out the three-phase in our first workshop and things like that. And I still, funnily enough, the reason I went into electrical engineering was I was passionate about big engineering projects. And I used my hero, like a lot of people actually, is Brunel, but in those days when he was doing those amazing engineering projects, they could do from the beginning right to the end. Whereas nowadays I ended up doing the end winding of a generator on a massive power station. I loved visiting power stations, but I didn't really like doing just a tiny bit of it. And one of the lovely things about moving into furniture is we actually do it from the beginning right to the end, or at least that's what I used to think. We start with a tree. Now I tell everybody actually the journey starts 150 years before us, because the oaks that we use are 150 years old, 120, 150 years old. And that fascination of man's intervention, going back all that time, we have open days at our workshop, and we always upend one of the beautiful planks of wood so that we put it back into the form it was as a tree, going upwards. And you can see the pruning cuts that, often done in 1870 by some French forester, because a lot of it is French oak, to make the fine timber that we use today. And so, that's one of the lovely things about handling wood, is you're handling something that has already had a story. It's already got a story, and you're enhancing that, and then you're delivering that to somebody who can carry it on way beyond again. So I think that, and what's lovely about it is that the story is written on it as well. So many materials, they're inert. They don't have any life in them. They don't have any specific characteristics. But pieces of wood, you can literally just see the age and the years going past. And yeah, at our open days, we give out these little discs of wood. They're like coasters, really. I always have some scattered around on my desk, and I've got one here, and it's even got it written on the back, 35 years. That's because I've counted the rings of wood going across it, and it took 35 years for the atmosphere to be transformed into this piece of wood. And I just think that that's a lovely thing for people to realize that, it wasn't instant like so many materials that we use today. Plastic just gets injection molded. This is something that took nature, a physical and memorable amount of years to produce. And we should be treasuring that far more, really.
Wouldn't it be great if every classroom had one of those beautiful coasters with "this took 35 years to grow"? Because children would love to touch that, and about the message of, well, everything that is contained in that wood. You could stand there for hours just talking about that circular piece of wood. I think there should be. If anyone's listening here who works with wood, take some samples to your local school and write on the back how many rings there are.
Yes.
And offer to go in and speak to the children, because we need more people working with trees and in every single way. So there's a challenge for you listeners.
Yeah, that's a fantastic challenge. I love that. And we're doing more and more with schools and colleges to try and do get the message across. Because I think the other thing about the message of wood is it is a big message of hope. Wood is part of the solution, and I think that's what everybody gets who works here and at Woodland Heritage and everything. It's what can get you out of the bed in the morning, because it's a living material, but it also, the more wood we turn into things that will last, the more carbon sequestration we're doing. We're capturing that carbon and locking it in for the future, and also giving people immense pleasure from the material, because it is. There is another podcast I listened to a little bit apart from this lovely Tree Lady Talks one, which I'm becoming a huge fan of. It's called Biophilic Solutions, and it's American too. American ladies discussing how biophilia could be the sole solution to some of our problems, and nature. And I've heard you talk about it as well. Our human biome with Ted Green the other day, talking about the fact that we're full of nature ourselves, just filled with it. And
when we're not, we're poorly.
Yes, that's it. And I completely subscribe to that. And I think that when the more contact people have with wood, the more contact they are actually having, even if it's in a secondary way, to nature.
Absolutely.
That's why I get so very passionate about it, and why I feel that both as a company and also with my involvement with Woodland Heritage, we have a responsibility to educate and pass on the information. It's a bit like in the food industry, when the whole disconnection and food becomes over processed. You get awful things like BSE happening and things, because people don't know where their food's coming from, and they don't.
I'm very concerned about the food culture at the moment. It seems very polarized from let's just go on an app and get something very processed very quickly without moving from where you are, to people becoming more aware about organic food, and everything starts with the soil. But tell the listeners about Woodland Heritage. It's a charity, isn't it, based in the UK? When did it start?
So it started a year after I left Hook Park. And in fact, I think Peter Goodwin and Lewis Scott came and visited Hook Park. They were just in the process of forming it while I was there, and came and saw me a year later. So I became a founder member. They were both furniture makers.
What year was that, Simon?
So that would be in 1994.
Okay.
Because we started the company in 1992. So the next year is going to be the 30th anniversary of Woodland Heritage. This year was the 30th anniversary of my company,
Oh,
Gaze
right. Oh,
Burvill.
congratulations.
So we're very closely related.
So,
yeah, thank you.
What are the objectives of Woodland Heritage?
So what Peter and Lewis saw is that a lot of the wood they were using in their furniture companies was coming in from abroad, and they thought, why is that? Why are we bringing so much wood into this country? And then they started looking and learning and discovered that actually, we do not produce much grown timber in this country. And they thought, so why is that? We have perfectly good growing conditions and things. Why is it that we're doing that? And it turned out that we have, way below the European average, actually, of forest in this country, because the average in Europe is about 30%. And we're, at the time of the start of Woodland Heritage, I think it was about 11 or 12%. It's now increased to about 15% tree cover in this country, forested. But so half, but that's still quite substantial. But it turns out that in 1900 we were down to 5%, and in fact, we nearly lost World War One through running out of wood material. And the Forestry Commission was set up in 1919 to address that. But we'd lost our knowledge. We'd lost the knowledge that went into a lot of tree planting, and people sometimes complain about the Forestry Commission's efforts to.
Yeah,
but they were told to plant trees that would grow quickly.
They were
completely wrong when they planted conifers. They were doing what they thought was right, and there is a place for conifers for sure. They're very, very productive woodlands. But also, what would happen is that our deciduous hardwood trees went on, a lot of them overcut for the furniture industry, ironically, around the High Wycombe end area, where we could probably cut too many beech trees down, and then the whole regeneration of those woodlands, especially the hardwoods, the deciduous trees, takes a very, very long time.
It does, but also you've made a really fascinating point earlier on. You said 1919, the Forestry Commission were formed because we nearly lost the First World War, and there was a lack of skills at that time. Actually, I find that really encouraging, because we are beginning to build skills again. Right now, you can get a grant to study forestry and trees. Very new scheme, which is incredible. There's new apprenticeship schemes in forestry, which is hugely popular, and there soon will be in arboriculture. And actually, I think that these things might be cyclical, and maybe I think we're actually on a curve upwards. Yes, we do need to get those courses into schools, listeners. But actually, the fact that we were very low on skills at that point and then built up shows that we're now, I believe it's quite positive. Going back to Woodland Heritage, who are your members? What sort of people make up the membership of the organisation?
So that's a very good question. And Peter Goodwin, who was one of the two founders, ran his own furniture company, Titchmarsh and Goodwin, which is still in existence, to very fine, more traditional style of furniture. But he was a great guy, a really an engine of change, I would say. He would go out and so I think our initial members was everybody Peter Goodwin knew. but then very quickly he became and wrote quite a bit about his passion for using British wood, particularly oak. He was passionate about the oak tree, also walnut. Also very interested in the wild service tree, which is one we're very interested in. Yes,
I'm going to talk to you about that later. Yes.
Yeah, and very interested in the classic British hardwoods, and realised that that there was a lack of knowledge. There were few people who were incredibly knowledgeable, but just not enough of them, really. And so he wanted to bring them together and really sort of try and focus on how do we address this issue. And the conclusion was, and still is to a certain extent, that furniture makers and users have a role to play in this, in that the more, and it's sometimes counterintuitive. Again, people will ask me sometimes when I'm at a show like the Chelsea Flower Show, where do you get your oak from? And my heart sometimes sinks because I think I'm never going to give the right answer, because sometimes I say, well, I get it from France. And they say, well, why don't you use British oak? And I say, well, we're trying to, but we don't always get the supply we need in terms of the quality and things. And now we're using some British oak.
Yes.
And I say, so we're using British oak. Why are you cutting down our trees?
Oh, no, it's very difficult.
So the point is that actually the message is that the more trees we use for fine things, the more demand we create for that wood to be produced in the quality. And so the management suddenly makes sense. The management of the woods, which actually has been shown to increase biodiversity, it's a really important environmental message as well, that managed woodlands are actually the ones that create the habitats. And this is misunderstood again by the public, who think that, the best thing is to leave a forest alone. And that's just not true.
So 50% of our woods in the UK are not managed. So, and there is a real tension between people's understanding of we just have to preserve everything in aspic, literally do nothing. And also people often equate forestry with just standard coniferous planting, which is then clear cut and then grown again. But, good woodland management is incredibly biodiverse. I mean, the old coppicing regime.
Well, this is it. And so Lewis Peter had this vision of, so how do we regenerate the wood culture? And what I'm particularly encouraged and delighted by is that nowadays is that, there's a whole, we're not on our own in this. There's lots of organizations that are saying how important the wood culture is to us all. But their vision was, so how can we make it? And they came up with several things. One was, to start training people in the whole cycle. So they set up a course, Woodland to Workshop, which I did. I went on that in 2012, and it was like a mini Hook Park. So for me, I had actually done a year of a similar sort of a thing, but it was still to be reminded and re-encapsulated the challenges, because there are organizations and they're doing a great job of just saying let's plant trees, but the real solution is far more complex and long. It's a longer story than just planting trees. It's actually, it starts with choosing the right species and the right soil and the right place, and then growing it, but then nurturing it through management, thinnings and things like that, and whether you mix the crops and everything. And then finally, when the trees are ready to be felled, they need to be extracted. How's that done? Then sawmilling, which is an incredibly challenging process. And that has to be done. And then the wood has to be dried, and that takes years and before we even touch it. So all of these stages are really important, and they're of equal importance. So Woodland to Workshop encapsulates this, and then actually goes right through to the end, and you see furniture makers and things like that. And so people really see, and it's been very helpful, not just for people who are just fascinated by it, but also people within the industry. Suddenly the penny drops. We have furniture makers come on the course and go, I had no idea it was so hard to get the wood. And
well, that's it. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? We work in our own little bubble, don't we, all the time? So can anybody go on this course? I mean, how often are these, and how frequently are these courses run?
Well, this year we managed to run them twice. I think next year it may be only once. It'll be probably in May. But we try and run them, once or twice a year. They're held up in Hereford, which is now our spiritual home, because one of the things that happened in the evolution of Woodland Heritage. So we saw this importance of the wood culture, and we communicate it by the Woodland to Workshop course. We have a fantastic journal, which has actually taken a step up in quality this year, Wood Culture.
Yes, Wood Culture. It's so beautiful. It's A4. It's a really thick, beautiful paper, actually. And the articles are incredible. But one of the things I enjoyed about the journal was reading about the demonstration site, James Wood. What's happening at James Wood and why is it important?
So James Wood, this is a wonderful project that came about through a legacy. A young man, James, who worked actually in the city, I believe, but contracted a life-ending disease. Decided that he wanted a wood planted after he died, and left us a really good sum of money, but wanted with the intention of it being something that was there to help mankind, really. And so it, very much the ethos, and we've met his parents, who are lovely people, and that they saw what Woodland Heritage did and saw the importance of the whole vision of going not just to plant trees, but to see where those trees are going to end up, try and look really long term into the future. So we had this sum of money, and it was really quite a challenge. It took us 2 years to find a site which we could buy to plant trees on. It's quite a complicated business. I had no idea, but we finally got a site, and it's a beautiful part of on the edge of the Quantock Hills in Somerset. And I went to school in Taunton, so I know that area, and it's beautiful. And it's what's great about it is there's Quantock Hills. You've got actually a real diversity of habitat. There's a sort of like a little upland bit, which was fields, and then it went down into a valley with a wetland bit at the bottom.
Good.
Some of it's south facing and some of it's north facing. 87 acres in all, of which 10% was already planted with grant schemes probably 40 years ago, and a pretty good demonstration of what happens if you plant trees and neglect them.
Yes, I think we've all seen those already, but it's good to measure that. Can I ask you also about some of the species that are planted there? And what's the thought behind it? Are you doing different trials of different species? I know you're doing things with wild service tree, for example.
So we've got quite an exciting and ambitious planting scheme. We actually only bought the land this year in the end, finalized, and went through. Last year, but it feels like it just is this year. But then it was a question of getting the planting schemes together, and it is. Gosh, you realise how complicated that all is as well. We will be getting some Forestry Commission grants, certainly for deer fencing and protection from that perspective. But it's a balance then, because we would like to plant some trees that are hopefully going to teach us what's going to be right with the climate ahead of us.
So what species are they?
We are looking at our native species, oak in particular, sweet chestnut, but we've also got, we're looking at wild service. We're also looking at a plant called Robinia, which I know is quite controversial in some ways, but I've certainly used it as a timber. It's a very interesting timber, grows also known as black locust, grows very quickly, which is very good for carbon sequestration. It's a durable wood. We can steam bend it, which is something I'm interested in because I do a lot of that in my day job. And we're also looking at cricket-bat willow. We're looking at cork oak as well on the southern-facing slopes.
I'll be really interested to know how that goes.
Yes. I mean, so this is where I have to confess, I am not a tree. I know enough about trees to know that I don't know anything about trees. I'm fascinated and passionate about it, but I can't keep up with the number. I think it's 30 species in all that we're planning to, and some of them are being, applauded by the Forestry Commission, and others we're having to sort of say, look, come on, this is an opportunity to really see what will work and what won't. And so, because it is a challenging time. I think, we hold these field days, and again, there's a huge steep learning curves every time we do that, because we have some really tremendous members. So going back to our membership, actually, we have a real cross section of people from right across our wood culture who are members. They're foresters, a lot of, good level of foresters who are most of them at the very top of their game. So, we have Sir Harry Studholme come to Field Days, and he's got some, amazing views on it. We have, but we also have then sawmillers who come. Last time we had Tom Compton from English Woodlands, and then we also have lots of furniture makers and things like that. One of the things, we just recently had a trustee strategy meeting, and we feel that one of the things that we do need to step up now is to go a bit beyond our comfort zone. We have a very good community of people who quite a lot of them actually understand why we need to exist and our importance, but we need to reach those people who don't know that.
Well, do you know who you should? Do you know what would be really great would be to invite some of the national DIY stores, yes, and some of the well-known furniture makers who mass-produce furniture. Yes. Well, it's all very blue and yellow, and some of the house builders as well. Wouldn't it be good to get all those people together in a wood at James's Wood?
You're absolutely right. Well, I might need to work with you on that.
Yeah. No, we could work together on that. Let's do that, because I'm all for that sort of thing. Just taking a quick break to talk about Barcham, the tree specialists. I love Barchams. They've been really influential in our industry and have been very generous in hosting lots of events. And they've been generous to us too, because they are our headline sponsor of our forthcoming conference. Now, Barcham trees are really ahead of the curve. They're the only nursery to have a shelf life on their containerised trees, because they care passionately that when you buy a tree from them, that they are going to establish in the landscape. They also have a plant healthy certificate, and they have their eco tree tags, so you can see exactly what ecosystem services the new tree you're buying is going to deliver. And I know from personal experience how good their trees are, because we planted 3 trees in our old property and they absolutely flourished. They really put on a lot of growth over 5 years, and they made a real difference to the property. Check out their website at barcham.co.uk and check out their Eco Tree Tag page for lots of useful information. And you can go on a carbon calculator and work out if you've flown somewhere or you've travelled somewhere, how to offset that carbon. The other thing I really like about the Barcham Tree website is that you can go on the tree finder and look at some photographs of the trees, get handy facts. It's all there for you to enjoy and to learn. So thank you, Barcham Trees. And the other thing I loved reading about in Wood Culture magazine was Whitney Sawmills.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So Whitney Sawmills was when we've really started to step up and change as a charity. I think, Lewis and Peter, well, there was one big thing that they'd done even before then. So we had our journal, which has been going almost since we started. We had the Woodland Workshop, and then the next big thing was that Peter did see that oak trees were getting a disease, and he was very worried about this. He actually had an oak forest which had signs of these lesions in the tree, but horrible black lesions. And he raised with a campaign that lasted for about 5 years, about £3 million to fund acute oak decline research. And this is before the Forestry Commission was saying they could afford to do anything, and nobody was prepared to step up. And he did an amazing job. And we've been using that. So we have a restricted fund section of the charity, which has been supporting. And Sandra Dedman, who works out of Forest Research, actually just up the road from me in Alice Holt, has done an amazing job of putting together really top scientists and from students as well, and PhD students. Yes. And the discoveries she's made are quite incredible. I mean, one of the lovely things it shows is that our oak trees, which are so precious, there's 120 million of them in the country. They're the largest single species. Well, some people say it's birch, and some people say it's oak, but oak is definitely, in terms of production and size and everything else, because the birches don't tend to live so very long, but oaks are really our key tree in this country. And it'd be just a terrible it's not even worth thinking about.
Not even what I know, but they're part of our, I mean, they're an iconic tree. They've been used as many people's brands. If only they knew.
So she's been doing all of that. And in fact, that's been morphing into Action Oak. But then we had the most wonderful legacy in 2015, a wonderful guy called Sidney Draper, who was the head of the World Bank Forestry and traveled around the world, just been a member of Woodland Heritage for a very long time, saw the importance of what we were doing, and he left his house and certain amount of money to Woodland Heritage when he died. I remember tree planting in his 90s. He was out there on our field day planting trees with us. Amazing guy. And he wrote a lovely letter, which is published in one of our journals from the back in the day, saying, you know, just go and do something adventurous with this sort of thing. And Whitney Sawmills, which is where we've always done the Woodland to Workshop course, is a medium-sized to small, I would say, sawmill up near Hay-on-Wye, near Hereford, producing really fine woodwork, doing the sawmilling jobs that others might turn down, if you like, but very technical, run by Willie Buller. And but he was really wanting to retire, and it was in danger of closing, and so we took it on. And it's now, we've invested in it. It's got a fabulous new me-bore saw. We train people there. We educate people there. But also, it's a productive sawmill. And part of our remit and mission is to explain to people that sawmills can and should exist, because they are a vital part of the chain because it's all very well managing the woodlands and then extracting the wood, but if nobody can mill it, you can't then turn it into fine timber. And it's a complex and challenging operation. So we support that, and you know, there are many other mills, and I know some of them turned their heads when we first took over a sawmill. Said, "What's a charity doing taking over a sawmill?" We said, "Look, we're not here to compete with you. We're here to expand the market and to help you and support the conversion of trees into fine timber." That's what we're about.
So with that sort of, it's almost like a public outreach about sawmills then. So can members of the public on defined days come and see what you do?
Absolutely, yes, yeah, and you know, that's something we want to build on, actually, and because we took it on initially for a 5-year lease, and again, through the help of our donors, we were able to buy the freehold of the site again just a year ago. So it's now established as we fully own it. It's also, delighted to say, profitable, and all the profits feed into the charity. So it's forming a virtuous circle for the future.
That's very, very good.
And people can visit, yes. And so now we've made it our home. So we had a new chief executive join in February of this year, John Orchard, and he's actually based just southwest of Birmingham, but he goes to Whitney once a week. We have a fantastic sawmill manager in Dermot Doyne, and they just, you know, together and with the team there, I think there's now 14 or 15 at the sawmill, and we've also got other members of the charity, because the charity, we've got, I think it's 6 or maybe 7 employees if you include our researchers and those who are working on Action Oak, and so it's all become quite a large entity when you think it was just... Yes,
it is a large entity. Two partnerships people. As well.
Yes, and, but we because the second founder, Lewis Scott, died 2 years ago, and I took on the chairmanship, which I will be handing over at the end of the year. I'll remain a trustee, but one of our other trustees is stepping up to take over the chair role. What we've evolved into now, and this is an exciting phase for the charity, is something that it's not relying on, you know, the engine of 2 founders and their energy, but actually a whole group of people. And we're working in cooperation with all the other charities in the sector more and more to say, look,
like Grown in Britain,
in Britain, and Silver Foundation, and Gabriel
Yes.
Henry, massive
Yeah.
supporter. And
I'm just gonna say I love speaking to Dougal Driver from Grown in Britain. That was a podcast a year ago, and Gabriel Henry. Actually, I interviewed him for one of his fictional books,
right.
which was absolutely wonderful. And he sang. I got him to sing on the podcast.
Oh wow,
which he was very good at.
That is very good.
He said, "I can't believe I did that." No, it's really good. And actually, I had a look at who your trustees were, and Mai Millet's, who's a bit of a star, an up-and-coming star. She is a very powerful young forester who started up Tree Sparks, a social enterprise to get young people into forestry. She's done some amazing work for the industry. So well done, Mima.
Well, thank you for that. No, she'll love to hear that. And I think it's really important, and it is exciting, that there are so many young people interested and wanting to come in. And we feel that that's part of our role as well, is to help facilitate that. We've got James Walmsley, who's professor at Bangor University, and taught so many people as well. So, so I think we do feel that our mission is more important than ever. We can't do it alone. And I think we need to reach out to many other areas to join together. And I think that's one of the nice things, is that it is a very collaborative industry and sector we're in, and people do see that, and we need to make it more inclusive, all of the work, and because sometimes it may feel, I certainly, the first time I went to forest with a bunch of foresters who were talking in Latin names and quite complex, you sort of may feel a bit timid and a bit intimidated by it all. But really, actually, what you very quickly learn is that they're all saying, "I don't know" as well.
That's a really great thing. No, I think our industry is very collaborative. And what we keep needing to do is to reach out beyond the industry, to burst through that wall.
That's right.
And it sounds like the work that you're doing is definitely reaching people. So
Dougal Driver's actually, his that podcast you did, forgive me interrupting, but that was the first of your Tree Lady talks I listened to, and very, very inspiring. And he really does hit it in a nutshell with a lot of the things he says about what we need to do for the future.
And there's a link to a film with Dougal in it from your website on the work that they do, which is about 15 minutes, which is very informative, which listeners can go to see that in action. I mean, how do you think we can change consumerist relationships with forests? I know we've touched on it.
I think it is through wood. I think it's giving people that story all the time, and keep reminding them. I mean, we hold events here with my company. We had one, Use Wood for Good. We're trying to use that as a more often than not, or using wood for good. And I think we've got a much more receptive audience than I've ever seen before. So that's really good news. But I think also it's quite exciting because there are some amazing stories as well. I mean, I'm going to show you a couple of things. I know it's a podcast, but you can see I'm holding 2 ash chair legs actually. And when we have our open days, I hand these 2 chair legs around. Ash is a wonderful material. I still hold out hope that there will be long-term a solution for the dieback. In the meantime, anybody who uses wood, just use as much ash as possible. Vastons are doing a tremendous job with their brimstone, turning it into durable wood for cladding. And the more that happens, the better. The more we can use ash. We've actually got a tie-in from our estate where we make our furniture. They've got 350 acres. A lot of that is ash wood, and we're using it. That's only coming a mile down the road to be turned into furniture. But one of the lovely stories, which applies to both ash and oak, I've got 2 legs, and I hand them round when we have events. and one of them is a reject. They look identical pretty much, and at the end I give out a prize if anybody can figure out why one of them is a reject.
I'm looking really hard at the screen. It's not good podcasting this.
No.
I'm staring at two beautiful spindles. I just want to touch them.
Yeah.
That's the thing about wood. You want to touch it, you want to smell it.
The thing about these two, and there's a hint because at the bottom of them, one says 330 grams, and the other one says 240 grams.
Oh.
So one of them is actually, 25% lighter than the other one, and actually that is made it weaker. And for a chair leg, it's not strong enough. Now the funny thing is that the reason it's weaker, and we discovered this partly because we sent one off early on when one broke, thought it was from a diseased tree. It wasn't. It was because the tree had grown too slowly.
Really?
So the tree that failed, yes. So with ash, and it's the same with oak.
Too slowly.
Yeah, this tree, but this one here has got about, I think I did count it once. I think it's 35 years of growth to make. They're both the same diameter. And the other one, it took about 8 years. And the thing you get.
So sorry, the heavier one took 8 years.
Yes.
I see. Well, I'm showing my ignorance. Every day is a school day. I thought that slower growing timber was inherently stronger.
So there you go. You see, this is the exciting thing is there are so many counterintuitive stories. That is true with conifers, but it's not true with hardwoods. So it's not true with oak and ash.
The Sitka spruce. Oh, that's why the Sitka spruce in Scandinavia makes really good violins.
That's right.
Because it grows really slowly because it's so cold.
But here, but it's that's what I always used to think. It's the other way around. And it's because
Why is that? Yeah, tell me why.
So every year in the spring, the tree is really active. So it has these huge pores. We call it springwood. The biologists have a much fancier name. But anyway, the leaves have to open. So there's all this fluid going up down the tree while the tree is super active. And actually, I love it that you can look at an ash tree and you look at the size of the buds and they're huge. And when they open, there's this huge leaf that comes out. I mean, it's a multi-leaf leaf. It's got about 9 bits to it, and it comes out really quickly. So ash are incredibly active in the springtime. Oaks are pretty active as well. They have quite large leaves that open quite quickly. So they have this springwood, which is always pretty similar because it's got these big holes that allow this activity to happen. But then after those leaves are out, the tree starts turning into a factory. It's working hard to produce timber, hardwood, which is the structure, the stem of the tree. And that is what we call the late wood. And it is dense, not very porous at all, thick material. And in the better growing conditions, that band between the springwood of one year and the springwood of the other year gets very large. Whereas if it's slow grown, I mean, you could probably not see it, but the end of this one, which is the slow grown, you might just make, actually you'll see at this end better. You'll see that the annual rings are very close together. And then if I show you the one, actually I could probably put it next door.
Yeah, no, it's good. I can see it.
They're very far apart. And that is because you've got all this late summer wood, which is dense structural material. And that's what gives it
I love
great.
that.
And that's the same with oak as well. So if we can grow our trees quickly, not only is it better for the environment, because they are sucking up more carbon.
Yes.
But they make stronger wood as well, which is a really lovely story.
How fascinating. And so that may be why Robinia is good then, because it's such a bolter.
Yes, absolutely. And so by thinning out the woods, you're favoring the trees to grow quickly. Yeah, and you're getting more strength in the wood as well as increasing light to the forest floor, which helps biodiversity. It's just win-win. And that slow growth is just not great when it comes to these hardwoods. So that's
so this just goes back to the centuries and centuries old technique, probably thousands of years of bodging.
Yes. Yeah.
Making chair. So when we moved to Suffolk 4.5 months ago, we thought we'd take the dogs for a walk. On our first dog walk, we walked out of our house went down a public footpath through somebody's garden because Suffolk is like that. And there is our lovely, we now know him, our friend, our neighbour, who is a woodworker. And I felt like I was in paradise as I walked through this narrow garden on a steep valley, believe it or not, in Suffolk, full of trees. And there he was bodging chairs.
Yes.
And carving things and making shrink pots and doing wood carving. So I walk there every day. I talk to him every day and I go and have a good old sniff.
Yeah.
And a good old touch of all
that was
the
the
wood
other
and
thing.
the
And
timber.
I remember that with Ted Green talking about the smells of the different woods. Yeah.
Yes.
Funny enough,
not just woods, actually, with Ted Green.
No, it's earth as well. Yes, he was saying. And very right.
Yes, that's right.
Rightly so. Yes. But I think that's, that's a lovely illustration of the connection. And if you look at beech, so now every wood I look at, I try and imagine the tree it came from, because you can see it tells you so much. I mean, a beech and birch, what they call diffuse porous, which means that they have very, very mild annual rings. They don't have this great big annular spring wood. And you look at a beech tree or a birch tree in the spring, and they have tiny little buds, very delicate. And a beech tree, the leaves open very gently over a period of weeks, and then the leaves are never very big. And that's reflected in the timber.
I love that. I don't think, I'm not sure I've always made that connection, but you've explained it so well. How fascinating. And going back to sort of reaching out to the public, and it turns out people like me who really should know better. I saw on your blog a scheme in Leeds where there's an installation of timber around a sculpture.
To be honest, I need to go and see that, because I've seen pictures and I was immensely proud that Whitney Sawmill had cut all those boards. It's Douglas fir, I believe, but huge, great big trees. Yeah, really specialist job to create it. And again, very inspiring, because I think it's this thing again. I love upended boards, because it is still like you see that connection with the tree again, which is really important. But it shows that, and these are the sort of projects that we love to get involved with, because I think they do capture the public's imagination when they see it and start wandering through those woods.
It looks really good. On the photograph, I haven't been there either. It's called Making a Stand, and it's in Leeds City Square. So that's a really, really good public outreach project. Woodland Heritage is a partner with Action Oak, and I understand there's a special seat.
That's right. Well, this is where my day job starts to cross over into the charity work, and we were looking at how we could do more with British timber. And one of the things that challenge us, we do a lot of steam bending, and steam bending does require immaculate wood to be clean and bend. And it's one of the reasons we source quite a lot of our oak from France. I won't tell you the full story of why the French are so good at growing it, but barrels might have something to do with it, and ships as well. But we want to use more British oak, and so we came up with a design that didn't require steam bending and would allow for what some people might call faults, but we call character, and is really the parts of the tree that tell the story. A knot is basically a branch, and if you think of that way, and you could be a little bit more forgiving, people could be a little bit more forgiving on timber when there's a knot in it, and trust the furniture maker that they will understand how that behaves in a piece of furniture, because there are times when they can be weak. There are other times they don't affect the strength or integrity of the piece. And we deliberately, on this new design of seats, so some people on your podcast, I joke, have a new book. We have a new bench, and the new bench is called the Amity seat. It won a design guild mark, and it's made entirely by oak grown in Britain. And for the first 100 seats we've made, we've inscribed the Action Oak logo on it, which is this lovely intertwined pair of oak leaves. And we're giving £100 for every seat that we make to the Action Oak initiative. And Action Oak has sort of taken over the mantle of protecting our oak trees for the future, both the ancient ones, of which we're proudly the holder of the most number of ancient oaks in Europe in this country. And that's another thing which we can be very proud of, because they do carry very important DNA as well in their acorns. But also, looking at any threats to forested oak, timber oak, every form of oak. So that's a great initiative, which we're very proud to support. But we also, with this new seat, set ourselves a challenge to try and make it as commercially viable as possible. And that was, so we make for very, very high end, sometimes, very wonderful, like piece on the picture behind me, pieces that take many, many hours, even weeks to make. And the price is therefore in line with that. So we wanted a seat that would go together quickly. And we use a combination of traditional techniques and some very sophisticated modern computer-controlled machinery. And it enabled us to do a joint, which I'm going to just explain, and you can see it on our Gaze Burvill website.
So tell me, Simon, what does this joint look like?
The joint that goes into this seat is called an enclosed double foxed wedge tenon.
That's a phrase.
And if you look that up and craftsman making it, there's a lovely piece by a craftsman in America who says that, in his opinion, no more than 2 of these joints are being hand cut in the world on any one day. And that is because it's an extremely challenging joint to be done by hand. And it's extremely unrewarding because once the joint has gone together, it's totally invisible. So nobody would know if you've done one of the hardest joints there is to accomplish in woodwork, because it'll be totally enclosed. But the point of it is that so basically it's made up of a mortise and tenon, which is a classic thing, but the mortise, instead of being parallel sided, is dovetailed. And then you use 2 wedges into saw cut slits on the tenon, so that when the two pieces are pushed together, the wedges force open the tenon, fill the space of the dovetailed mortise, and can never come out. The problem with it is that the dimensions of the wedge and the slot and the tenon and everything have to be perfect. Because if they're a millimeter out, if they're a millimeter too wide, what happens is you push the joint together, it's too loose and it rattles around, but you still cannot take it apart. And if it's too tight, you get it halfway in, it'll jam, and you'll never be able to get it apart. So get it wrong and you write off the whole piece.
So what's that called again?
So it's called an enclosed double fox wedged tenon joint. We've got on our website, we've got a little GIF that shows how this thing goes, and it gets put together because we're very proud of it. We do it on the machine, which can be accurate to 0.1 of a millimeter, so we know we can achieve it. But what it's enabled us to do is actually push these seats together in a way where the joints are incredibly strong, totally invisible, and completely watertight. So it's a brilliant joint to do. And the whole team, we were very delighted to win a Design Guild Mark for this seat, and it was shortlisted for Sustainable Product of the Year by the Chelsea Flower Show. We're getting through the seats actually now. So Action Oak is also benefiting, and what we're trying to do with this seat, because it does have these knots and things in it, is say, look, this is English oak. Look at our English oak trees. This is what we need to work with. And the more we can do, the more encouragement it gives the foresters and the whole chain that precedes us, which is so important. We tell people, our furniture is just part of the journey, that has started 100, 150 years ago. How
wonderful. And how can people buy one of these seats?
So they can do it from our website, actually, which is Gaze Burvill. So www.gazeburvill.com. GAZE for the Gaze, and BURVILL for my name. And it's a great place. Hopefully you'll be inspired. if nothing else, do come to one of our open days. We hold two a year, and you can see some really fascinating woodworking going on, from steam bending, and we talk about the trees. We're very passionate about the whole connection with wood culture, and we quite often have a presence by Woodland Heritage as well, and Silver Foundation and other organizations that are trying to get this message across, because it is so important to us, and every member of the public who suddenly the penny drops, it's like, yes, that's going to help our futures, because it's all our futures that are relying on this.
So that leads me nicely on, Simon, to what is your dream scenario?
Gosh, yes, the dream is re-establishing something that we've had, and I think is within us, but has in some places been lost, and that is that connection where people look at wood and they ask, where did this come from?
Even a toothbrush.
What is the story behind this piece of wood, and value it? I think in the future, hardwood timber prices have gone up. They've gone up a lot. They've doubled in the last 4 years. But I don't feel bad about that. I feel it's important that it does that, because we should be prizing this material above all those. It's now turning up in all sorts of places, replacing plastic. And that's, again, a good thing. But it's challenging for the industry. Yeah, wooden toothbrush, wooden toothpicks, more and more places. And we will find that we need to use it more carefully. And we're doing more and more. We're looking at every bit of our wood waste and saying, can we make something out of that now? And the higher the price, the more people will prize that. And so I think that's an important part of the journey. But understand that if it's locally grown, or even European is still better than long distance travel, then that's important too. And it's like our food, don't necessarily go for volume, go for quality, because it will last, but also it'll be there's a whole chain behind it of people who are very thoughtful. And I think the more the public can understand and respect the forestry profession, because they really are the custodians of it all, and they're the people where it all starts. And I think when, as Dougal Driver rightly says, hear the sound of a chainsaw, it's probably forest being managed. It's probably a good thing, and support that rather than complain. Go and find out, if nothing else. Find out what's happening, and I think that's really important. And so more young people getting into it, because it's a lovely profession to be involved in anywhere along the chain, and you'll be full of luck because you'll be touching wood the whole time.
I love that. Oh, Simon Burvill of Gaze Burvill and Woodland Heritage, thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Sharon.
Oh, I so enjoyed that conversation. I really learnt something. I didn't really know, to be honest, about which would be heavier, the younger tree or the older tree. So, never stop learning. Every day to school day. And on that note, Noel and I are fresh back from Malmö in Sweden, where we went to the Swedish Tree Association's conference. It was wonderful, and we had a walking tour the day before to see their tree planting techniques. They plant large trees really, really well, and the difference they've made in the landscape is astonishing. What a great bunch of people. Thanks so much to the wonderful Johan Ostberg and Gustav Narslander. Talking of conferences, tickets for our conference will be on sale from tomorrow, that's Saturday, the 11th of November, at Sharon Hosgood Associates /training. The conference is on the 20th of February 2024 at Braxted Park near Whittam in Essex. And we've got the most incredible lineup of speakers, and thanks to our headline sponsors, Bartram Trees, we have a greatly reduced ticket for tree officers because we want to get tree officers and consultants together to share views, to work out how we can do things better. We will hear from keynote speaker Keith Saker, Jeremy Barrell, practitioners on the ground, not just tree people, but people who work in construction. We'll hear about biodiversity net gain, tree law, and have a BS 5837 speed briefing. It will be a great day, setting the most beautiful landscape, some of which we will walk through as part of our talks. So I do hope you can join us. I did all of that with a golden retriever on my lap.
Ollie, come in. Ollie, you come here.
Okay, the second dog is coming. I know they need their